I've learnt so much as a line manager, which I'm going to take back to the workplace myself.
The information was amazing. So many people resonated, and there was actually a lot of functional information.
My favourite thing was the talks from Colin. I think he got the information across really accessibly, but also in a way that I felt was sympathetic to people with ADHD.
Loved hearing about the different lived experiences from Tom and from Demet. Both brought a completely different viewpoint across, so really fascinating to hear.
I wholeheartedly recommend it. 11 out of 10 or 100 out of 10.
I think they give you really practical takeaways and an opportunity to network with other people in this field in a safe environment.
This was really well thought through, brilliant speakers. People really need to check this stuff out.
Hello everyone, welcome to Skills Sessions. Lovely to see all of you arriving onto the webinar. Please say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. I am joining you from Bristol. Hi Joe, thank you for the lovely message. Yeah, please do drop your location in the chat so we can give you all a big warm welcome. Hi Paula, joining from Amsterdam. Wow, Manchester, Oxford, Wales, Bristol again, Edinburgh. Can we go further than Amsterdam, I wonder? I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and see if we have any other international people joining us. If you're a regular attendee of Skill Sessions, you might be thinking that Rich looks a bit different. That's because Rich has handed over the hosting reins to me. My name is Claire and I'm going to be your Skill Sessions host from here on out. But obviously you're not on this webinar to hear from me. You're here today to learn about how to create a neuro-inclusive culture from the brilliant Danielle Cudjoe-Michalski. Danielle is founder of Thinking Light Coach, and she also served as co-founder and lead of the Neurodiversity Network at GSK, where she worked for nearly 20 years. So I'm really excited for you to hear Danielle's story and to learn lessons from her journey today. If you're brand new to Skill Sessions and this is your first event, then welcome, hello, it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining us today. We've been running these free online events now for almost a year, and there's now a community of over 1,600 of you, which is just phenomenal. In fact, I had a conversation this morning. I think we're creeping up to 1,700. So thank you so much for being a part of that journey with us. The objective of these events is to bring you experts and speakers on a whole range of topics around inclusion and neurodiversity in the workplace. You can always find the latest events on the CareScribe website or by following CareScribe on LinkedIn. We're super active on there. But we also have all of our past event recordings available for you to watch back at your own leisure and in your own time on YouTube. We've covered all sorts of different topics. So just search for CareScribe on YouTube or search for CareScribe online if you want to discover more about the latest events. I think a member of the Skill Sessions team is going to pop some links into the chat for you as well. So I mentioned a company called CareScribe there, and we're the organisation which makes these events happen. We're an award-winning software company based in Bristol, and we create assistive tech to help people who are neurodivergent or who have disabilities to be more productive and also more confident in their work or studies. So we have two products, Captioned, which is note-taking and captioning software, which is designed to help people capture and comprehend just the piles of information which gets thrown at them either at work or in education. And we also have TalkType, which is highly accurate, super speedy dictation software, which works with Mac, Windows, Chromebook, mobile devices, and also in your browser as well. So if you want to know more about these products and the impact that they could have for your workforce or for your students, and you want to get a demo from one of the team, just drop a message in the chat or reply to a Skill Sessions email. Right, so a bit of housekeeping before I hand over to Danielle. Today's session is being recorded. It'll be shared afterwards, so if you need to dip off, I know that there can be distractions, especially if you're working from home. If you need to dip off and you're worried about missing something, don't be. We'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow with links to the slides, which Danielle is going to share, the transcript and the recording as well. So you can refer back to it at a later date whenever you'd like. We've already seen and had demonstration of the fact that our wonderful Skills Sessions community love to use the chat a lot. We've set this up so that we can create a space for like-minded people to learn from each other and to ask questions. So I do encourage you to please make use of the chat function on this call. Make sure though that you're talking with everyone. There's a couple of options. You can talk to the host and panelists, or you can change your chat settings to speak to everyone. So just make sure that you're doing that so that your messages aren't lost. Likewise, if you find the chat a bit distracting during the session, you can hide your notifications. Just hover over the chat button at the bottom of the screen and just tick hide chat previews so you can reduce those distractions for you. If you're going to ask a question today, which we really do encourage you to do, there is a little Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window. Please put your questions in there. It means that I can see them, so I know that a question's been asked, but it also allows people to upvote questions. So if we get lots of questions coming in, it helps me understand which ones to prioritise and to ask our speaker. And also you can enable captions via Zoom if you would like to. I'm just going to have a quick look through this chat and see if we've had anyone else joining us from any wonderful places. We did have Australia last time. That's a good point, Joe. So Swindon. Hi, Kathleen. Lots and lots of familiar faces on this call as well. Worcester, Kingston, fabulous. Lovely to have you with us, everyone. Thank you for making the time to join this call today. So, I mean, you've heard enough from me now. That's not why you're here. I'm going to hand over to Danielle, who's going to share with you some tips and advice for creating a neuro-inclusive workplace. Had a conversation with Danielle last week and she's got so much to share. So I'm really excited for this session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Danielle.
Hello, everybody. And thank you so much, Claire, for that and the lovely introduction. So I'm going to be talking about how to create a neuro-inclusive culture. I'm going to share my slides. Just bear with me. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my slides. We did test it beforehand. So welcome to this session. And I could hear from the prepare calls that we had, everybody's kind of buzzing to understand more around how can we create this neuro-inclusive culture within our workforce, and make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So that's what I want to talk about today. So who am I? My name is Danielle Cudjoe-Michalski. I am a neurodiverse coach, TEDx speaker and consultant. I'm also, as Claire said, the founder of Thinking Like Coach, which is an organization in which I'm able to do all these wonderful things. I'm a previous vaccine project manager and co-founded and was former co-lead of the Neurodiversity Network at GSK. From transparency, I'm also dyslexic with traits of ADHD and dyspraxia. So just want to add that in. So again, things may show up in this session. It's giving you a real good insight. So what you're going to expect from today's session. Well, what you're going to expect, and I wanted to really think about how I could add value. We hear about this word neurodiversity, but I want people to understand why organizations need to embrace this culture of neuro-inclusivity and under the word neurodiversity. Like, what does it mean to our organizations, whether it's large organizations or smaller, medium to small organizations? What do we need to consider? Why it's important to have networks like we had the Neurodiversity Network at GSK and others. How to also consider intersectionality, and I'll be looking at it from all different aspects. And then from a neuro-inclusive culture, what can you do as DEI leads and HR leads? And what do you want your organization leaders to do? And then, as Claire said, we've got a lovely session at the end for Q&A. Just to be mindful that if anything that comes and I discuss at this session has any impact with you directly, please make sure that you look after yourself and get in contact with any support that you need within your organization. And just to be also clear, with the Q&A will be at the end, but if there are any parts at the time where I'm talking too fast or there's something showing up, please get in contact with either Claire or any of the people from the organization, and they'll be able to help you in regards to letting me know, because I do speak a bit fast sometimes. So, what is neurodiversity? And I think you coming onto this call, you probably either Googled it, heard the word, are aware of it already. It has absolutely exploded under any conversation to do with DE&I or inclusion diversity. It's also absolutely profoundly more exploded on social media and on the TV, and people are starting to understand what this word means. But in its purest form, neurodiversity is a framework of understanding the human brain function that recognises the diversity of human cognition as a biological fact. And the diversity in human is a cognitive form of normality. We know this because this is what shows up in terms of our genetics, in regards to our neurological pathways, our experiences, everything that makes up who you are. And I take that into consideration, even with twins, their experiences, their cognitive function varies. And that makes a diversity of different ways of thinking and approaching situations. However, there are specific ways that we work in our culture and society that become very, very typical, very, very normalized. And our society is set up that way. And the workplace has been founded and created and evolved working on those key principles. Some of those key principles are quite old and therefore have not been challenged or reflected on or evolved over time. And it means that some individuals can really struggle. And so those who have a neurological differences, like people with ASD, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and many, many more, actually have a different way and ability of processing information, which greatly differs than the norm, which means they have real challenges with cognitive function compared to the rest of the diversity that you have in the workforce. What does that mean? It means that they may need support going forward, and they may need that support to help them with some of the challenges that show up for them in the workplace. That could be from having excessive technology to help them with reading out loud, or it might be helping them with certain functionalities of the systems they're using. It could be as simple as having coaching and spaces to look at strategies that help them with environmental impacts that are impacting them from a sensory perspective. But it also means that these individuals actually come with really good ways of challenging some of the old school ways of working that we've had in our organizations. They're really good at seeing bigger picture, looking at problem solving, and really innovative ways of going forward. And we know in a day and age like now, that is so important. We're trying to innovate, we're trying to create even faster and even better, even quicker and even more efficient than we ever have. So we need these individual people in our workforce. So some of these differences, just to make it clear, when you Google neurodiversity, you will find a plethora of different types of differences, as I like to call them, conditions. They can come from including things like OCD and some mental health differences as well, conditions that can impact people. But in regards to the neurodiversity movement that was coined by Judy Singer in the end of 1990s, and what we kind of look at today under the neurodiversity umbrella, I'm going to focus on some key differences. I just want to go through a couple of them with you guys, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So firstly, we have autism or ASD spectrum, which is a spectrum of autistic spectrum that can impact people's ability to socialize sometimes. It can impact some of their processing speed. It can have different impacts in terms of their perspectives. And those individuals can come with amazing, amazing traits of being able to really have deep work into an item. They're able to really go into research really well, problem solve, and all these amazing things that they can bring. But there is a balance between the things that challenge them and the things that they can provide. And that's across all of these differences. Then with ADHD, you've got 3 different types of ADHD. So you've got the attentive, you've got the compulsive, which is the ones that most people are aware of. And then you've got the combination of both attentive and compulsive. And with people with ADHD, they can bring real energy to a situation, really good at empathy, really sometimes good at reading other people, but there can be challenges with sometimes focusing, they can have cognitive challenges, sometimes social interaction could be quite overwhelming as well. Then you've got the Ds, as I like to call them. So they've got dyslexia, which are mainly around challenges to do with reading, writing, and kind of grammar, but they are also impacted by some of the cognitive challenges that you get with autism and ADHD. Then you've got dyspraxia. Sorry, dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is very different from dyslexia, and there's more research around understanding the difference. But with that, that's more around how your motor movements are in regards to, it can impact typing, painting, writing, and there's still more research to understand more around this piece. You've got dyspraxia, which generally is around spatial awareness and coordination, but it can mean so much more. It can impact muscle mass, it can impact sometimes your processing speed, and so forth. Dyscalculia, as I like to say, is dyslexia's cousin with numerics, numbers, but again, cognitive function could be impacted. And then you've got Tourette's syndrome, which can also be impacted by cognitive functions. There's so many more out there. And the reason why I always put many more is we're starting to get data as science is advancing around neurological development and positive psychology. We're trying to understand more around how the brain works, how these individuals are challenged, how what benefits these individuals are bringing to the workforce, and understanding more around this complexity. But when you talk to neurodiverse individuals or neurodivergent individuals, you'll find that they believe there is a difference in thinking, learning, and communication. And they don't necessarily think that this is a disability. And this is really important for you guys as D&I and HR leads to be aware of this. And that's because it's important. And I'm going to share some stats. And these stats you may have heard before. So they say 1 in 5 individuals globally may be neurodiverse. We know there's complexities in regards to religion, culture, in regards to accessibility to data. And we're really trying to gather as much data to try and get some clearer understanding on the statistics. But that shows that there's going to be an impact on majority of organizations are going to have a member of staff that's going to be a part of the neurodiverse community or impacted in some capacity. We say roughly in the UK, about out of that 1 in 5, 50% don't actually know they're neurodivergent, but they don't even know they have traits that may be neurodiverse. And so that can be really challenging, because if they don't know that it's a struggle and they perceive this to be the reality and norm, it means it's really hard for them to ask for help. And sometimes the only way they can see that is by connecting with others. And then of that, 40% of individuals who are neurodiverse are unemployed. And I did a talk yesterday and someone asked me, what's that 40% mean? And it could include individuals from non-verbal individuals who've got autism, all the way to individuals that are working in the workplace or used to work in the workplace, are really struggling with, continuous employment. So it really does vary in regards to that 40%. And we know that at the moment, the 40% in the UK, we know that we're protected under Equality Act of 2010, under the disability part. Neurodiversity is covered under that, as it's seen as a way of protecting those individuals in regards to recruitment, in regards to employment, and other aspects of their life. But I want to flip it. If we say 40% of neurodiverse individuals are unemployed, it means that around 60%, and please don't get me on my maths of all these stats, are in employment, are working in your organizations, are people that you are trying to support. And that's really important, because how are we making a safe space for them to show up every day? And it's really important we have some legal obligations, and they come under the Disability Act that those individuals might not relate to, but it's really important that they get the support they need. So I thought I'd share a little insight into a neurodiverse life and journey, and that one's my own. So I was diagnosed in my final year of university after a long process of being really confused and not sure where I wanted to go, and being told at primary school that I would never go to university, and that my reading and writing was just being kind of lazy. And my mum and family were very supportive of that. And in my final year of university, when I did my dissertation, I was told to go for an assessment, and the assessor said, "You're severely dyslexic, and we're not quite sure how you actually were able to get through education so far." And that was a scary moment for me. I was young. I was working in STEM, I was working in science, I was studying to become a biochemist. And then I had the privilege, through some really hard work, to join GSK as a microbiologist. That came with its own challenges. It came with the imposter syndrome of, how did I, Danielle, the dyslexic, woman, manage to get into GSK of all places? Such an honor. I'm very privileged to be able to have worked for an organization. But in my role as a microbiologist, one of the things I had to do was do high quality reports, and high quality reports that went in front of the FDA and MHA, which you guys all know now because of COVID. You know all these acronyms, but these are the organizations that really dictate and manage and regulate our pharmaceutical industry. And I used to have to write reports and give them into those organizations as a part of the audits. And that petrified me. It really did. And it got to the point where I didn't disclose my dyslexia, and I just kind of tried to get on with my work. Unfortunately fortunately for me, but unfortunately for the situation, was my manager actually realized that there was something wrong, done what you don't do now, and asked me, "Are you dyslexic, or we think you're dyslexic?" And I said yes. And I was able to get some support on a team level. Throughout that career, at that time, there wasn't much about neurodiversity. Occupational health had reports, and there was things being built up in the organization, but there wasn't really anything there. And my manager and my team, who knew, done the best they could to support me, which was really, really pinnacle in my career, because I spent 11 years as a microbiologist. But I got to the point where I started switching my mindset from focusing on the things that really challenged me, like my reading, my writing, creating these quality documents, my time management, my procrastination, all these things that were showing up, and focusing more on my strengths. And my mentor or coach was a lady that was quite senior in my department, and she pulled me aside and said, "You could do so much more. I think you could really deliver more." And I started questioning, how can I add more value to GSK? And so she gave me opportunities to learn new skills, look at my strengths. And in 2016, I was able to move into pipeline project management, which is quite a senior project management department within the organization. Here you work across the pipeline, delivering and supporting the projects that actually, innovate the business. And I naively didn't realize that. I went in and I just worked my best and hardest, and things and challenges were still showing up. Doing a different role meant that the things I had to support me had to be adapted, but I was able to create a successful career. And I realized the real importance in mentorship and coaching. So I started supporting others. And I really, really enjoyed that, really just expressing how my journey had been the last X amount of years in GSK, from a bench scientist to becoming a project manager. And others were really, really interested. And then the renowned Professor Sarah Rankins, she's absolutely amazing, came to our site to talk about neurodiversity and the levels of neurodiversity in a STEM organizations, that it'd be higher. And she sat there talking about it. A group of us went to the front really eager, and she challenged us to have a conversation. She just challenged us to have a coffee and talk about it. What she didn't know, and what we didn't know at the time, was that was the day that the Neurodiversity Network was formed. And it was formally formed in 2019. And we started with just local talks, having conversations, and then we realized that this is really interesting. If there's a small group of us just having little talks locally, just having coffees locally, and really connecting and uniting, surely this is a bigger thing that we need to adapt. Then the pandemic hit, and that made us flex. And as neurodiverse individuals, we like to flex. So what did we do? So we switched from being local to being global. When we went online and became a global community. At the end of 2023, when I left, the Neurodiversity Network had grown to over 900 members globally, which consists of those who identify as being neurodivergent, whether they're diagnosed or not, and feels a part of their community, parents of neurodivergent children, senior leaders who want to advocate, and managers who wanted to know. I personally left the organization so I could expand my coaching coaching business to be able to really focus on supporting neurodiverse individuals, not just at work, but holistically at life on a one-to-one basis, and be able to deliver my experience to organizations like yourselves and help on things like today. But it was really important that that journey of creating the NDN was also a part of my journey. And there was other amazing co-founders who helped create this real initiative within GSK. So I want to talk a little bit about the NDN. So as I said, Sarah Rankins came, we had a coffee, and it was that simple. The first thing we did is look at our mission. We looked at it like it was a project, like we all had. We were bench scientists, quality controls, IT, project management, all different people from different experiences coming together. And it was really as simple as that. It didn't have to be big. But the most important thing is we wanted to understand what our mission was. Our mission was to bring awareness across GSK around neurodiversity, because we didn't see that. We hadn't seen that. And if we had, we wanted to make sure it was more visible. We wanted to educate our leaders and teams to know what neurodiversity was so they could work better together and they could support not just only that community, but also look at how they adapt. We wanted to go back to what I said, where we created an organization on really traditional ways of working and evolve, agitate a little bit, try and understand why we do what we do. And most importantly, we want to support the neurodivergent employees, whether that's them impacting themselves or as a parent or any other connection that they have that's impacting how they show up at work. And as I said, in the pandemic, that exploded us to be a global team. And we started in supporting places like the US, countries over Europe. And when we left, we even started to impact our hub in India, really making sure we're bringing that knowledge around neurodiversity. So there's one thing you need to understand about this, and some of you may or may not know this. It is not formalized across every country. As I said before, in the UK and the US, we're very, very lucky to be protected under our employment acts and our equality acts. But there are different countries who don't see neurodiversity show up in society, which means as someone neurodivergent, showing up in your true self at work can be really challenging if outside of work, you can't even get the support or even talk about it. So it's really important when you're looking at creating these spaces, you allow people to create the space, knowing that there may be some situations where employees may not be able to show up, even in their home life, the way they want to. And it's how you can support them while they're at work to help them have less stress and perform the optimum that they can to innovate your organization. Some of our successes was not just bringing awareness to the culture of individuals, but actually looking at the business benefits, the workforce benefits, looking at the data around, or what was there, very limited at the time, around why we should be taking this into consideration, why creating not just a neuro-inclusive workplace, but a culture was really important. We collaborated with the amazing initiative, GSK Workplace Adjustment Service, which talked about how you can get support through whether it's physical disability, hidden disability, through pregnancy, or anything else. We started collaborating with them around neurodiversity guidance and other management and senior people across the organization. We didn't just stay in STEM, we went to our procurement places, we went to our IT, we went to our legal, we tried to make sure that was visible across the organization. And we shared from a global community, but also from a leadership. And I had the privilege of even talking to our CEO around university and around a lived experience on why GSK needs to invest time into understanding how they can support their staff. And I'm such a privilege to be able to know that they've been able to do that. By that, we've been able to create support groups and connections, coaching and mentoring to create safe space for those individuals who are impacted on the ground every day. And we were able to recognize different strengths and different challenges by really sharing our lived experience as an organization. I'm not going to hear someone talk about being a microbiologist somewhere else. I'm actually seeing someone on the screen who's a scientist who was where I was and potentially having the same challenges as I am. That is powerful. That makes me realize this organization really wants to hear me. And these individuals in the NDN really want to support me. So it's great. We had the Neurodiverse Network. How did that change my career? So just to kind of see how that can impact others. When I was neurodivergent, when I was diagnosed with being neurodiverse, I was confused. Having that support of coaching and mentoring really helped me focus. I learned to focus on not what my challenges are, but my strengths. I really started to lean into that, which means I built up my confidence, but it also meant that I was starting to be able to advocate for myself. You see, when I left the microbiology role in 2016, not only did I go into project management, but I was able to get promoted and accelerate my career quite quickly, just in that space of time after I left. And that's all because I was given the support to be able to look at my strengths and get some extra support for the challenges I had. I embrace the challenges. Most neurodiverse individuals want to be able to get support around their challenges. They want to embrace them. They don't necessarily always want to hide away from them. Sometimes they show up in our different jobs and different projects we're at. So it's really important that even though we're looking at the strengths, when we're looking at challenges, we're like, okay, what do we want to do about it? How do we want to go forward? A lot of times when I first started NDN, people were saying, oh, maybe people should move into different roles if you're challenged. But actually, I disagree. You see, I told my manager when I got diagnosed, give me more reports. I want to write more reports. I want my reports to sit in front of the QP quality person at the organization, in front of the MHRA. Regretting it internally, I'm dying, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to be able to prove to myself that I could develop this skill. Unfortunately, a lot of the time I write is very scientifically now, but it was really helped my confidence. There was an underlying need. And with a nice soft approach and support of the people around me and the opportunities around me, I was able to not only do that, but also get involved in other projects where they were like, oh, you can do this, but also we could put you in something else. So I was balancing some of the things that would help with my challenges and help utilize my strengths. The most important thing of all of it was admitting I had an issue. And this doesn't mean that you have to admit that you're neurodiverse or of a label. It just put your hand up and saying, I have a challenge. I have an issue, I have a concern, and I need support. And if I hadn't agreed and said to my manager, yeah, I'm dyslexic, that would not happen. If you're dealing with individuals that are from a different generation than now, a lot of us were told you don't disclose. You don't say when you go to the workplace that you're neurodivergent. You don't say anything. You just get on with the work. And so the first thing for me to be able to say, yes, I am, was, to me, the first way I was able to accept that I had a difference and that it was okay and it was valid, and it would be able to work through it and get the support I need. One of the things I also learned when I grew up was that I wasn't stupid. And this is one that is a bit controversial, because one of the biggest issues that happen with neurodiverse individuals is this aspect of feeling like they don't belong, that I feel like I'm stupid, or worstly, if they have a late diagnosis, what does that mean for me now? I've been doing my job for 20 years and now this diagnosis has come up, challenging my perception about what I should be doing. And that can be really, really hard. But I can say with the support, my inner belief over time improved, and I realized I wasn't stupid, and I realized the value I could bring to the organization. That's great, because that actually brought up my resilience. And generally, neurodivergent individuals have a high level of resilience. They may not see it, but over time, they are literally dealing with these challenges every single day, not just at work, but their personal life. And the importance of creating that space was people felt like they were seen and heard. So in my time when I started, I had just my team and my manager. But by creating that network, now there was hundreds of people who I could talk to, knowing that I feel empowered to ask for what I need. I found a space where I could share my concerns and challenges. And also as a manager, wow, understanding this is an impact. I need to do more to understand. I'm not the only one. Really big thing. And as a parent, I can see where I can get support. So it's really important creating those spaces, as small as they are, to be able to support and create a community that would really help that one person, that two people, those 5 people that are impacted by neurodiversity. But we know that we are not just one thing. I love to bring up the lovely word of intersectionality. It's complicated. As I always say to people, is intersectionality is what you perceive, what you see, the things that you may know. As on this call, you can see that I am female and I am Black. Now you also know from this talk that I am also neurodiverse. But there's so much more underneath that people need to be aware about. For example, what you don't see, I should have had this ready because I usually do, is I have a hidden disability. This is the lanyard, the sunflower for hidden disabilities. What you don't know is the complexity that comes up and shows up for me that also impacts how I show up as a neurodiverse employee. And why do I bring that up? Because intersectionality needs to be considered when we're looking at individuals. We need to really make sure that when we're looking at neurodiversity, we don't isolate it. Yes, some people might not identify as being disabled, but they may also identify as being disabled. Some people may identify as being something else, but we don't judge. We're trying to create a space that is inclusive. And that means that we may not be the ones who have all the answers. We might need to ask our community what they need. And we need to think out the box of just race and gender. You think about classism, we have to think about economic situations and stages, life stages. All of these things overlap and make our experience. And as DEI and HR leads, I know you're used to some of the others, but really take a step back with neurodiversity and make sure we're incorporating the fabric of what DEI is in all capacities, including how you may show up as neurodivergent. If you were to compare someone who got diagnosed at the age of 50 compared to someone who got diagnosed at the age of 15 and entering their career, their experience is different. So when you're looking at initiatives, make sure you get a plethora of different types of experiences, as well as different neurodivergences, so you can understand what is needed. So the main talk of this is, Danielle, great. What can I do? So I want to share a few tips around what you can do. So for DEI and HR leads, really, it's about aiding your leaders to proactively support neurodiverse individuals with different experiences and intersectionalities in themselves. Things like reverse diverse mentoring schemes, things about having a coffee sessions, get the leaders to have a look and put some time in to actually engage with the community. Number one, they feel like feel that they're being seen and heard, but it also means that you're building that culture, because all the tools, all the things that you can put in place in regards to accessibility is great, but if that culture is not there where they feel safe, number one, they won't disclose, and number two, they won't ask for what they need, and then you're stuck. Create a support community through coaching and mentoring. People really underestimate, organizations really underestimate the value of coaching and mentoring programs. People knowing and feeling like they're either sitting with someone in the same situation as them, or they're able to have insight from someone in the same department with them, or talk to someone who's professionally trained to really talk to strategies. It might not be stuff, it might just be even mindset around how they can process information, how they may be talking to themselves about things that have happened and shown up for them in the past, and how they can work forward to advocate for themselves. So these can be really, really powerful tools that organizations can use, where they can share their working experience. And I say sharing their working experiences, not just how their lived experience is, but how it impacts them in their job. You know, some of the things that have been successful, what has been challenging. Also sharing with, you know, maybe newer people in their career, some of the things that can be coming up for them and how it's been tackled. All of these things can be really, really useful, particularly for neurodiverse individuals. One of the things that they can struggle with is the social norms and the workplace norms, where the cues are, how things work. That is even more difficult for those people who are neurodiverse. So again, having people share about their experiences, kind of call it out to some extent, is really, really useful. It also makes it useful for the community to start thinking about, is this really what we're talking about? Is this really kind of the reality now? Or has those experiences and norms and cues changed in our organization? What is our culture of organization? How is it evolving? And biggest thing as part of intersectionality is finding crossovers of initiatives and collaborations. One of the great things that we were able to do before we actually formally were any sort of ERG, employee resource group, or got any funding and money, was just literally tagging on and collaborating with women in leadership. Another disability group that we had, the LGBTQ plus ERG spectrum, just engaging, talking, collaborating, just getting the intersectionality out there so people could go and say, oh, I'm not just a part of the LGBT plus community, I'm also neurodiverse. And I'm being seen from all different aspects within my organization, really embedding that deep culture of another level of belonging or feeling like they belong. And then leaders. This is your hard job. I'm not going to lie. This is one of the hardest jobs, is trying to get for DEI, HR, and people that work in these initiatives to get their leaders to really commit. So I'm going to share some pointers, knowing that this is such a hard job sometimes. It's getting leaders to agree to show up and advocate for neurodiversity, and making them commit to what capacity. Business goes on and they're always busy, there's always things going on, but really finding those leaders who really say, this is an initiative that I feel strongly about. I'm going to make sure that I'm committing and showing up, whether that is I'm going to open up a talk that they're having, or I'm going to attend a coffee morning where the topic is around neurodiversity, or I'm going to do a video about what it means to me. These things are so vital in creating that culture. It's all well and good the people on the ground having the culture, but they need to see their senior leaders believing and understanding that this is a topic that is important to the whole organization, not just the people on the ground. Discussing strategies to support and advocate within the neurodiverse community. So it's really making sure that they are showing up in terms of sponsorships, mentors, coaching, working with that network. We were very lucky to work, and I had privileges to have connections with other sponsors of other employee resource groups and networks who I would actually tap into in the beginning to kind of understand, how can I build up this network? How can I support? And they gave such vital advice that was really, really useful. So again, those people that are already on DE&I sponsorships, tapping into them, what can we do about that? Maybe they can't really support because they're already sponsoring something else. But they might know other people that might want to sponsor. They might know other things that might be useful to create that environment. Ensuring that neurodiversity is discussed at leadership meetings and bringing you guys on board. I know it might be scary being in front of your senior board talking about DE&I and these initiatives, but it's really important. If they don't know, bring the people that do. Bring the people that understand how important it is to the organization, and have them at those leadership meetings. Not just, you know, present to me, to present to, have them there. And try and see if you can influence to be on those meetings, to be, if it's 10 minutes, just be visible, just to show the impact. When I was able to sit with our CEO, it was because we were talking about mental health. And I brought up neurodiversity because that is where I wanted to bring it. And that then opened that discussion completely. I had an opportunity and I gave it. And those are the things where we can bring up this topic and really make sure that it's aware. And I think actually by then the organization really understanding it, it was able to communicate, and people then had that next level of support. Advocating and allocating resources to neurodiverse initiatives. As I like to call it, bring the money. That's probably one of the hardest ones because you have conflicts of different intersectionalities, different things that they need, profit, innovation, creativity. But it's really important that we actually need to be able to have some funds and resources. People are resources, money is resources. Some resource to be able to help say we are committed to make sure we create a neuro-inclusive culture in our workplace. And look at it in terms of succession planning. You know, when you're looking at succession planning, when you're building out a team or future leadership board or any kind of project, looking at other aspects like you do with other D&Is, like do we have the right balance of male and female? Is there a variety in terms of genders and religion and cultures? Also, remember neurodiversity. If people have open and disclosed, is there a different in terms of mindset? Is there anybody that's willing to kind of add a bit more to it? Because they might be the one who comes with that key question that could change a project and innovate it and skyrocket parts of the organization. And make an accountable commitment is one of the things that we really need leaders to do. So as I come to the end, some key takeaways. As you all know, neurodiversity is a new term under DE&I. So it's really important that you let your organization know. You're not going to have all the questions, and so you're not going to have all the answers. You're going to probably have more questions than answers. And actually, if you go into my community, we've still got loads of questions and answers that we need. But together we're on a journey. And the point that you're on your journey, wherever you are, already makes me feel seen and heard. Creating that space already means that you're listening to me. Accepting that neurodiverse individuals identify and their needs vary is really important. You haven't just tapped me with, I've got ADHD and this is what I need. You've listened and heard to what I need. Diagnosis is complicated, and some of you may end up being involved or being disclosed or need to support those who are diagnosed, but also understanding it impacts their well-being. And trying to find initiatives to help support those individuals while they're going through that complex time, help their well-being, but also help their management, their team support them in some capacity as well is really useful. I've already talked about it enough, but intersectionality and how it impacts. Please make sure you keep that into mind. Hopefully you found some actionable steps that helped you understand, you know, things that you could implement or consider your organization. And most of all, the power of coaching, mentoring, and even sponsorship in regards to helping those individuals who are neurodiverse, but also building that culture up of inclusivity. A neuro-inclusive workplace enables everybody, not that just those who are diagnosed or not diagnosed neurodiverse, but everybody bring their best selves to work to drive innovation in our organization. So I just want to say a massive thank you for CareScribe, for inviting me to talk. And I'm going to hand it back over to Claire for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Yeah, thank you. What fantastic. Can you see me? I'm not sure if you can see my
I can see
face, but
you.
you're okay, fantastic, excellent. Thank you so much for that. And what a fantastic professional achievement to say that you've created this neurodiversity network at GSK, which has now, what was it, over 900 people when you left?
800 people when I left. And I can't say it's all mine. There's many co-founders involved, and it just shows the richness of bringing people together.
Yeah, 100%. I thoroughly enjoyed that session. Also took some notes away, and just the bits that really stuck with me when you were talking about what leaders can do to support was around the bit you said about allocating resources. Like, it's all well and good talking about it, and that is absolutely fantastic as a first step, but making sure that you're allocating time and budget to really bring these things to life is so crucial. And also the succession planning. You know, if you've built up this legacy and you've done all this wonderful work, how do you ensure that that's still pursued at the organisation when you leave? So some really good food for thought there. Thank you, Danielle. We have had some questions. We've got 6 questions and we've got a few moments to go through them. So let me just have a look at the Q&A. So the first one which came in, Danielle, which is, where do you think your career would have gone if you didn't have support at that time?
Oh, that is a really good question. And to be honest, if I didn't have the support, I might have still been in the lab as a microbiologist. I was one of those interesting people that thought, I want to do more, but I've got all these challenges, so I can't do more. And this started before I joined STEM. So I joined science because I was like, I can't do anything else, so I could do science. So that was why I did that. And I think in that capacity, what it was able for me to do is have that mind shift. And throughout my career from being a microbiologist to then working in project management to then becoming a coach, it was the question I always asked myself is, where am I adding value? And when I was in GSK, I wanted to add as much value to the organization. Like, I started to understand I had skills, people who actually enjoyed things that I did. I'd been there long enough, so I could say that I wasn't a newbie, but I wanted to add value. I wanted the organization to thrive. I wanted science to thrive. And so that was the switch. And if I didn't have that encouragement and support, I probably would still think that no one's gonna listen to me, not really good enough, and just puddle away on those things that were my challenges and never even realize, not even focus, but not even realize that I had strengths to give.
That was a good question. Thank you to whoever asked that one. Another question here from an anonymous attendee. They said, if you work on DE&I efforts in a department where it's global with individuals from different continents and cultures, how can you pitch any awareness you're giving at the right level? Like you said, in the UK, neurodiversity is more commonly embraced in comparison to the rest of the world, so it might seem quite an unusual concept to them. So how did you approach that, Danielle?
It depends on the organization. So within GSK itself, they would have the local, what we called health support or occupational health or HR systems, depending on different countries. And so one of the things that we used to talk about when we do our talks is we used to make it very, very clear that we'd be from the UK or US, and these were our legal support, legal things that we knew about. And we started to try and understand a little bit about Europe. Every country is different in Europe, which makes it so it's not even Europe, it's like every country is different. So we tried to gather that data as much as we could with insights. But when we're doing a global talk, it was really putting those caveats in space, saying, look, there are countries like the UK and US, and under the Equality Act, under disability, neurodiverse is seen. However, we understand there are loads of countries that don't have that privilege. And therefore, if you need support in the workplace, please feel free to talk to your local, HR, occupational health, whatever health support, to find out more support you need. But please know, on the complete prime basic, the purest form is that you can always come and join this community if you want support. So even if you can't get that support in your culture, at your family dynamics, whatever it is, that at least when you come to work, we can try and give you the things that you need. And it's even things like the workplace adjustment service, which is absolutely fantastic. They were working to make sure that that was available in every country and hub, even if things like neurodiversity wasn't really not a norm in those countries. So that was probably it's challenging, but being very transparent. As someone who may be diagnosed or may be self-aware that they're neurodiverse, just knowing the organization has something sometimes is enough, even if you know outside of work you haven't got support.
Yeah, nice, thank you. Obviously you shared lots of advice through that session, but a question we've had come in is, if someone wants to start their own neurodiversity network in their organization, where to start? What's like the first step you would encourage them to do?
It depends on the organization. So with ours, we just got together, had a coffee and decided. We didn't ask permission. As neurodiverse individuals, we're like, right, we need to do this, end of. But there is challenges sometimes in organizations. Some of them can be quite complex when you're setting up networks and ERGs. So the best thing would be to do is talk to the ones that are currently there. If you have networks and ERGs currently there, talk to them about how they've set it up, what things they may have gone through. I think in hindsight, I wish we had done that more. We were just enthusiastic and just wanted to get the message out, and then COVID hit, so things just changed. But I would say learn from, don't reinvent the wheel. Some organizations have disability and neurodiversity together as one network. Some have it differently. So really make sure you understand from your community, not driven by the business, not driven by someone whose DEI role, that's an initiative for their objectives, but the community identifies that they want that kind of connection. And sometimes having those in one bucket can help you in regards to resource if the other one's already established. But on the purest form, it may be just putting a post out into the internet saying, this is neurodiversity, we've got October celebration month, come and have a coffee, let's have a chat, let's see who's happy to help. And that's how we build up our team. Our team was started off as 7. A lot of those individuals left the organization and we had new people come in. So just start the conversation.
Nice, good tip, start the conversation. I like it. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up. I'm very aware that we have lots more questions in the Q&A. So what we'll do, Danielle, we'll catch up with you afterwards and we'll capture some answers from you if that's okay, and we'll pop them into the post-event email. Also, we'll share your contact details as well, just in case anyone wants to get directly in touch with you. But I'm just having a look through the chat here and we're getting lots of really wonderful comments. So thank you, Danielle. Really interesting session. This was incredibly fulfilling and refreshing. What a great session, amazing session. So yes, thank you once again, Danielle, for taking the time to talk to the Skill Sessions community today. Really, really brilliant stuff. For people on the call, if you enjoyed today's session, please could you do us a massive favour and just tell people about these events? A really simple ask, whether that's mentioning it to a colleague or sharing it on LinkedIn. So every bit of word of mouth helps. And we're really eager to grow this community, to create a really valuable network for people. So whether you're neurodivergent yourself or you manage a team of people in an organisation and you want to better understand how to support, please, we'd really appreciate it if you could help spread the word. Next month's event is on the realities of misdiagnosis in the workplace with Hannah Butcher. The link to register is going to be in the chat, but we'll also send it in the follow-up email, which is going out tomorrow, which will have the remaining Q&A questions, link to the recording, the transcript, and Danielle's brilliant slides as well. It will also include a link to a survey where you can request a CPD certificate for your attendance if you'd like one. And also, we'd love to hear your feedback. It directly shapes the events. We look at it every month after each event, and we have actually changed and tailored skill sessions based on feedback. So you are listened to, you are heard. So please give us your feedback, positive or constructive. We'd love to hear it. The survey will also appear on the screen when you leave the webinar as well. Look at that, 1 minute to 2, fantastic for time. That's all for today, everyone. Thank you again, Danielle, so much for sharing your story with us. It was really, my first skill sessions hosting and I've had a really brilliant time. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone on this call for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Danielle. We had quite a few questions come in on that Q&A, so we're going to go through a few of them now. Thank you so much for giving us your additional time. The first one, it says, I did want to ask about mental health, which I know you sort of mentioned at the very start of your session. They've asked, where do mental health conditions fit into neurodiversity? For example, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, PTSD, etc. So if you can answer that, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, so if you were to go and Google neurodiversity, a lot of these differences and conditions actually fall under neurodiversity. In terms of the neurodiversity movement itself, so you've got neurodiversity in regards to the diversity of mindset, and then you've got neurodivergence, and neurodiversity is a subgroup of those who think differently. And under that clinical aspect, yes, these mental health stuff can fall under that umbrella. In regards to the neurodiversity movement, a lot of the focus in the community is really around the ones I mentioned in talk, like ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, autism. And that is really the difference in regards to how people are kind of assessing it. To be honest, I feel like the more data we have in terms of scientific data, we're doing a lot of brain mapping, we're looking at psychology, there's a lot more research around in clinical psychology about neurodiversity, that may shift and change. But where we are now, generally, if you hear the word neurodiversity, those are usually the general ones that people are talking about, but we are aware of the mental health capacities as well. And some of the examples is that individuals, for example, who may identify as being neurodiverse may suffer with anxiety and depression. They may have been diagnosed and have anxiety, depression, even though really their deeper diagnosis may be that they're neurodiverse. So that's why it's very complex around it. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. So that's quite a tangled web, I think, isn't it? The next question which has come in is what things, so you talked about succession planning as one of your tips for leaders. This question is, what things can be put in place to support neurodiversity specifically under succession planning? Do you have any tips, Danielle?
Yeah, so there's succession planning in many things. So if you're thinking about new roles and you're thinking about how you're building up your teams, it's looking at, okay, where do we have neurodiverse individuals? Have they disclosed? Or do we have people that haven't disclosed, but they've got certain benefits? Is looking at everybody's strengths and challenges and see where they might fit in regards to leadership roles. I think one of the things that is a big amber flag is that some senior leaders feel like if they hear that someone's neurodiverse, they cannot be leaders. They are not capable to collaborate. They can't inspire. They're not sociable, and that's completely wrong. And I think that's why we need to take into consideration, actually, from the person, if you've got a panel of people, where are their strengths, and understanding their strengths, and then looking at where they can fit in terms of succession planning when it comes to leadership roles. The same thing I would say with promotion. I mean, I'm very blessed that a lot of the way that we started looking at it within GSK was not just what you were delivering, but how you were delivering it. So again, as someone neurodiverse, it means that I don't have to fall for the normal way of delivering a project. I utilize my skill sets and strengths to deliver it in a way that might be different, that might be creative and innovative, but actually I'm still demonstrating delivery. And those things helped me get promoted and also kind of move my career up and many others. So that could be another way of when I'm looking at succession planning. It's really about looking at your teams, looking at your leadership panels, who you feel that is going to be able to deliver what you need in terms of your business goals, but also who will deliver it the way that you want to be delivered and in the culture that you want your organization to be. And that's probably the key.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to navigate, I think. Another question we've had is, I know it can be really difficult to access a diagnosis, waiting lists, medical costs, impact on other healthcare. Do you have any advice for managers trying to help employees who don't have an official diagnosis or who are self-diagnosed?
So this is a real sensitive one. It really depends on the employee themselves. If they haven't disclosed to you, obviously there's nothing you can do, which is the biggest part. We don't go around saying, I think you've got ADHD. I'm your manager, I've known you for 15 years. We don't do those things, despite my manager doing it to me. It was different times. Yeah. However, if someone in your team, whether it's a peer or a colleague or someone in your team has disclosed that they either are going through a diagnosis or they're self-diagnosed, which a lot of people are starting to do at the moment because they're understanding that they're having challenges showing up for them. There's not much you can do in terms of the diagnosis piece unless you have a mechanism in the workforce that you can go to occupational health or to someone in your HR to say, is there a way that we can support this person getting diagnosed? That is really varies in a spectrum depending on the organization. But the main thing you can do on the real simple purist session is, how can I show up as a manager to support you with the challenges? You see, I'm on the fence, and I know people are going to say to me, Danielle, you need to get off the fence. Diagnosis is great, right? It gives us data, clinical data. We can do more research. We can get funding for research. And I really embrace people getting diagnosed. Hence the reason why I'm trying to go through mine. But on the purest form as a coach, the most important thing is that individual support. So as a manager, how can I show up and support you? Am I the right person to support you? And what does that look like? And if the person doesn't know, then go on a journey with them to find out how you can do them. That will make the biggest impact on a day-to-day basis than waiting for a diagnosis. And I know that because I've gone into organizations, I've coached in organizations, and some of those people are saying, like, organizations are saying, we don't want to wait for X to get the diagnosis. They need the support now. And that's more important than anything else.
Yeah. I like what you said there around going on the journey with them, because something like that, I think just showing your support and being with someone and showing up in that way as a leader makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Another question. Do you recommend organizations having neurodiversity specific mentoring and coaching programs? And if so, what combination do you think would be most adoptable or effective? A neurodivergent person mentoring, coaching a neurotypical person, vice versa, or two neurodivergent people mentoring and coaching each other?
Oh,
that's a big one. That's a big question.
So I say that, so I have two schools of thought. And the first basic level is get a program together where people are coaching people. And if someone discloses neurodivergent, again, it's a conversation that person is having in regards to, if it's mentoring, then it might be sharing experience of what they want to get out of it. So if it's a career progression or going into a different department, again, it's sharing your insights. With coaching, it's very different. It's also about understanding where they're at, where they want to go, and one of it's about how they show up and what support they need. And I would recommend that the person that's doing coaching have some, whether it's in-house, some sort of training around the coaching questions, so that if someone does need support, then yeah. From a neurodiverse perspective, I think understanding what that how things may show up for that person and having some knowledge behind it is really, really vital. A lot of those individuals do prefer to have someone neurodivergent or neurodiverse coaching them. Not sure, mentoring maybe not so much, but coaching them. But there is nothing saying that someone neurotypical cannot coach someone who's neurodiverse, and vice versa. So from a coaching perspective, I think it's quite complicated in making sure you've got dynamics right. What I'm not saying is you need to wait until you've got 5 neurodiverse coaches formally certified before you support your staff. Go ahead and have those conversations. For mentoring, it's a bit more lax, a bit more not so restricted, and therefore it's about sharing experiences, and it's very different to coaching. So that way, I think it's quite useful to have a mix. And actually, if you're looking at diverse mentoring, where you've got someone who's a junior role mentoring a senior person, even better. Have someone who's a junior neurodiverse individual mentoring a senior neurotypical person and give them insights, because it's value in those complexities. So I love that question. I think it just shows the different dynamics that you can have in the framework of your organization.
Yeah, great. I really like your suggestion around someone who's neurodiverse, or educating a more senior neurotypical leader. There's a lot to be said for that. This question here, it says, did you feel anxious talking to people? And if so, has this changed?
Oh, yes. So what I didn't talk about, I didn't go way back. So I was a very quiet, well, first of all, I was a child that babbled at the age of 2. Go and check out my TED Talks. I talk about that. My TEDx talk, I talk about me as a child babbling. And my mum, my parents didn't think it's any concern until I went to education, and that's when they saw the communication in writing being a challenge. However, even though I was a babbler, I was very much an introvert. I class myself as an introverted extrovert. So I'm a learned extrovert. I was very introverted. My mum used to push me quite a lot. I'd get a lot of anxiety about being the first to connect with someone. Once I'm in and I see a connection, then I can talk and you just can't shut me up. But getting me there was a real struggle. And it's something I even struggle now. Like a lot of neurodiverse individuals, I know people don't like networking, but a lot of neurodiverse individuals really dread networking because it's small talk. It's something that we don't get. Some of us don't get it. So a lot of us don't like it. And we know that we need to sometimes do it to kind of break the ice and then get to a point where we have a connection. It's finding those connections. And for neurodiverse individuals in a social aspect, if we don't have a connection, to some of us, it becomes an irrelevant relationship to have. And you find it very, very hard to be able to talk. So I force myself to talk to people. I love learning from people of all ages, completely different to mine as well in terms of backgrounds, because I learn more. I get more data points, if we're going to be very specific in my head. But I still get anxiety going to going to places. And that I think is normal. And especially if you're neurodiverse, that is particularly quite challenging. And I've spent a lot of time working with clients and myself through either being coached myself or self-coaching around what am I telling myself in a situation and what is true. So I can start being able to overcome that piece.
Yeah, the mindset stuff is significant, isn't it?
It's a game changer. Some of the things that hold back neurodiverse individuals isn't necessarily the external stuff. It's been impacted by the external stuff and is embedded into our internal messaging. And that's something that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, nice. Danielle, we have 2 questions left. If you are recruiting a new member of staff and on their application they mention that they're neurodiverse, how would you approach this with them when they start?
So I think the most important question, I think it's the red thread through my whole talk, was ask them what they need. So how's this shown up for you? Because again, we talk about they might have ticked it because they're diagnosed. They may be self-diagnosed. They may have a certain challenge and their challenges will vary. Neurodiversity, and you've been neurodiverse, neurodiverse is a spectrum. So it's like, how does that show up for you? How can I best support you in this recruitment process? It's probably the most 2 important things that they want to be asked. Now, bearing in mind, how does it show up for you may be a question they might be still discovering, but they can answer. How I can best support you may be one that they're challenged with, and they might want to have ideas around what is available. So for example, I would like to have the questions before the interview. I would like to have a way of demonstrating how I can do this in maybe some sort of, actually doing the task versus just talking about it. Being open, having options within the framework of your workplace and looking at that is a really interesting approach. We're not quite there yet with recruitment in regards to having the flexibility, but there are a lot of organizations that are doing that. I'd recommend that HR and DEI organizations start sharing best practices across how they can embed that in different organizations and different environments. But if you give those examples, it allows that within your organization framework, it allows people to then think, okay, this is what I need. It could just be simple as I might stop and have a break after you ask a question because I'm processing, or I might talk over you. Feel free to stop me and then bring me back in. It could be as simple as that. So.
Okay, Danielle, the final question. What should you do if you're working on DE&I initiatives in your department, but there is little buy-in from leadership? How can we get them on board in your experience?
This is going to be a very tricky one, but it's not, and it can be quite common, unfortunately. I think the most important thing is getting that initiative seen by senior leaders, because until they see the value, they just aren't on board. So one of the things we looked at when we did the Neurodiversity Network, and as I said, we didn't tap into other resource groups, which is another way of definitely tapping in and seeing how they've done it, was we actually went from a business perspective. We said, what is a business value if we were going to have to create this network? What would it actually bring the business in terms of innovation? What would it help in terms of the culture? What would it help in terms of some of the things that are showing up in our pipeline? Like, how would it impact the people showing up? Was there any data that we had to be able to support that within the organization? And using that to leverage on, this is the foundations of business, and this is what will impact the business, money, right?
Yeah.
Leaders talk money, innovation, that's their big talk, right? Talking their language is number one. Then we shared the experience, what it was like if you had challenges, what was showing up for them, and trying to leverage on, and this is where you're going to have to be a bit creative, like connect with people, go to other sponsors and say, who do you think would be interested to come? Would you come to our session? Would you promote this session we're talking about neurodiversity? And getting them to kind of help be advocates and building up that advocacy, even if it's not the ones that are going to end up sponsoring or be fully involved in your initiative, but at least advocates for it, who may be saying, okay, as an advocate, I want you to share this in your next team meeting. I want you to, I'm going to put a recording and make it maybe 1 minute, and I would like you to present that show that at the next team meeting. I want you to, we've got this coming on Thursday. I want you to promote it. I want you guys to talk about it at your coffee. Like, get those advocates to actually be doing stuff, even if they're not going to be be the advocates of the whole process for the longevity of the process and the initiative. Get those people that are on board to get involved, and look at the benefits. Bring in sector related businesses who have started looking at this. One of the things we brought in was Roche was looking at this, AstraZeneca was looking at neurodiversity, and we leveraged on that to say, guys, look, other people in our sector in pharma are looking at this. We need to start looking a bit more in there. We are one of the forefront organizations. We need to be able to continue that, and one of the reputations is our culture, and it's very important to GSK. So we needed to make sure that we were showing something. And also, one of the things we said, so it's quite a few, is also say to them, if someone comes into your organization today and you want them, doesn't matter what level of the organization, you really want them, they're going to innovate and really make a change in the business, and they ask you about neurodiversity, what are you going to say? Because then they sit back and say, oh, because there are people who are coming into their interviews and saying, what is your views on DE&I? What is your views on neurodiversity? Like, what have you got in place? They're really asking that. And I've had managers come to me in a panic saying, Danielle, you're the only one I know that's doing neurodiversity in GSK at the moment in the early days. What do we say? Because we haven't got a HR document and we haven't got this in place at the moment. We're working on it. And then we'd kind of put some wording around to kind of, we've got the Neurodiversity Network, we're building a culture on our journey, and that kind of, that will help them think about it. I think that's the best thing. And also for you and your team to really consider that in the beginning, the resources is difficult to get. It's probably one of the hardest things. Be realistic with that, be innovative with that, see how you can leverage other initiatives, resources, piggyback on other things so you can get that visibility. So visibility, so talking their talk, business, money, how to be innovative and create, leverage on collaborations, other initiatives to get yourself seen, finding and be really, really clear around sneakily finding people that are going to be secret advocates for you and making them commit to action of bringing up your initiative is probably the things that you can do. But I understand that it's quite challenging. There's a lot there, but there was a lot to say.
Yeah, loads of great tips. I liked what you said about the competition and positioning yourselves against your competition in the industry, because it's about attracting and retaining talent. GSK obviously want like the top talent in their business, and that's an interesting way to position it, again, speaking the language of the business there. Danielle, thank you so much for joining Skill Sessions today, and also for carving out extra time to answer these Q&As. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity for me to share my knowledge. If there's any other further questions, they can get in contact with me directly.
Thanks, Danielle.